I'm Patty, and if there's one thing I'm known for, it's my broccoli cheese casserole. It's the kind of dish that gets requested at every family gathering, and people always ask for the recipe. But here's the thing, this recipe has been in my family for generations. My grandmother passed it down to my mother, who passed it down to me, and one day, I plan to pass it down to my children. It's a family heirloom, and I've always believed it should stay that way. My daughter-in-law, Cammie, has been trying to recreate my casserole for years. She's made several attempts, but she just can't seem to get it right. I've always politely declined when she's asked for the recipe, explaining that it's a family secret that I'm not ready to share. She seems to understand, but I can tell it bothers her. A few weeks ago, Cammie came to me in a bit of a panic. She had a potluck at work the next day and needed to bring a dish. She asked me once again for the broccoli cheese casserole recipe. I could see how stressed she was, and I wanted to help, but I wasn't ready to give up the recipe, so I offered to make the casserole for her to take to the potluck. I spent the evening making the casserole, making sure it was perfect, just like always. The next morning, I handed it to Cammie, and she thanked me, though I could see a flicker of disappointment in her eyes. Still, she took the casserole and headed off to her potluck. Later that evening, Cammie called me and she sounded thrilled. Everyone loved the casserole, she said. I've never had so many compliments on a dish before. I was glad to hear it, but then she said something that made my heart sink. I told them it was my special recipe. They're all asking for it now. I was stunned. Cammie had taken my family's recipe, the one I'd worked so hard to perfect, and passed it off as her own. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to be happy for her, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she had taken something from me, something that wasn't hers to take. Over the next few days, Cammie kept talking about how everyone at work now associates her with this amazing casserole. She even hinted that she might bring it to future potlucks and family gatherings. It was as if she had claimed it as her own, and I was left feeling hurt and conflicted. On one hand, I was glad that people enjoyed the casserole. I've always been proud of it. But on the other hand, it felt like Cammie had taken credit for something that wasn't hers. She knew how much that recipe meant to me, and yet she let people believe it was her creation. A few weeks later, another potluck was coming up, and of course, Cammie was asked to bring her famous broccoli cheese casserole. When she mentioned it to me, I felt a knot of resentment tighten in my stomach. The idea that she would once again parade around with my recipe, taking all the credit, was too much to bear. That's when I decided I couldn't let it happen again. If Cammie was going to take my casserole to the potluck, it wouldn't be the one everyone loved. I'd make sure of that. I prepared the casserole as usual, but made some subtle changes. I used less cheese, more broccoli, and added a touch too much salt. I even left out a couple of key ingredients that give the casserole its creamy, savory flavor. The result was a bland, overly salty dish that I knew wouldn't go over well. Cammie picked up the casserole the next morning, none the wiser. I watched her leave with a sense of guilty satisfaction, knowing what was about to happen. Later that day, my phone buzzed with a text from Cammie. She was distraught. I don't know what happened, but the casserole was terrible. People were practically spitting it out, and I had to tell them I didn't make it this time. I felt a twinge of guilt, but also a sense of vindication. She went on to explain that in her panic, she confessed to everyone that she hadn't made the previous casserole either, revealing that it was actually my recipe all along. The same people who had praised her before were now questioning why she had lied about it. Cammie was embarrassed, and the situation had completely backfired on her. The very thing she had used to boost her reputation had become her downfall. Now I'm left to wonder if I went too far. Was it wrong to sabotage the casserole just to prove a point? Cammie did lie and take credit for something that wasn't hers, but did my actions make me just as bad, if not worse? Am I the asshole for deliberately ruining the dish and exposing her lie? Or was it justified given how much that recipe means to me?